Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Jonathan Pettit. I am an instructor at the University of Hawaii. I'm also affiliated with the Center on Religion in the Global East, and it's from that center that we welcome you here today. So this is our webinar series titled Mapping Religion. Starting last year, the center began a series of 6 webinars, all free and open to the public. Webinars feature top researchers throughout the world who are using spatial tools to advance the social, scientific study of religion in East Asian societies, East Asian diasporas, and religions originated in East Asia that are spread throughout the world. This series is generously sponsored by the John Templeton Foundation and Purdue University. So today's presentation is by 3 esteemed researchers from the University of Arizona, and we're very excited to have them here today. Each of the papers will be about 15 to 20 minutes in length. And after each paper, we'll have maybe 2 or 3 minutes for burning, pressing questions you would like to ask. But if you don't have time, it's okay, because at the end, we'll still have about 10 or 15 minutes to ask questions either to all the presenters or any questions that you had missed earlier on. And this webinar is being recorded, and the 3 presentations will be put on the center's website, globaleast.org, in coming weeks. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Philip Stoker, the University of Arizona. Dr. Stoker, please.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, can everyone see this PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you again very much. I'm happy to be here, happy to be presenting alongside my colleagues. I really enjoy talking about this research, and I'll be presenting Geovisualizing Regional Religious Systems, a new design of the RRS project website and its functionality. And I'll be highlighting kind of our approaches to mapping historical Buddhist sites and pilgrimage routes in Hangzhou, China. I am Dr. Philip Stoker. I'm an associate professor of urban planning at the University of Arizona. So I'm very happy to kind of be a part of this interdisciplinary project. In my presentation, I'll just begin by highlighting kind of our project goals of how we approach this. And then I'll move through the Regional Religious Systems website sections, highlighting our mapping efforts. And then one of the kind of my goals here with this webinar presentation is talk a little bit about how we used Esri's story maps to present this data. And so I'm going to kind of let you know what they are. If you're not familiar, they're pretty popular, so I'm going to assume some of you do know what these are. But I'm going to highlight the strengths of this tool and then some of the weaknesses, and also show a lot of our data as well. So I'll be presenting our Hangzhou digital atlas pages, and then we'll be looking forward to kind of what we want to do for our next steps. So I think about 2 years ago, we started this project to update the RRS website, the Regional Religious Systems website, which is hosted here at the University of Arizona. We also wanted to develop new maps using this great data. There was so much good data. We wanted to improve how we were visualizing that data, and then try to have it reach a broad audience as well. We wanted to explore how spatial visualizations can improve the communication of data, because the data is so good and it's there. How can we improve how we're communicating it? And then this website was also intended to be a data repository for historical data, so other researchers would be able to benefit from this. And then along the way, we would establish this new website for the RRS Research Lab as we continue to work together. So if you go to this website, and I'll show you all here at the end so you can explore it on your own time. We begin this, if you land on this web page, it helps define regional religious systems, and which you'll be hearing about today also from Professor Jiang Wu. But it provides an overview of the website. We are able to put some of our news and major events for the research lab here. So last year when we were hosting the PNC conference, we were able to advertise on our website and kind of show some of our work. And then other parts of this website have links to our data and our maps. When you go to our mapping page on this website, we're looking to establish a searchable database so that you're able to look by map name, by region, or by religion, all the different maps that have been made throughout the years by us and former members of the research lab. So we're at 46 maps and hopefully increasing. And this is definitely intended to be our digital repository of all the maps that have been made related to this research. Each map can be downloaded as a full-size image, and then what we felt was important too, when you download this, you get good metadata as well, so that you get the map author, the data, the region, and the year produced, so that you're getting good, high-quality data with each map. We've got a portion of our website to highlight past and current RRS lab members. So you see 3 of us here today, but we've also got some of our former, and I think I see there's even 4 of us here today. That's great. Kind of want to acknowledge that this is a team effort. So I'm presenting a lot of these maps, but this has been a collaborative effort of this team getting the data, cleaning it, and presenting it. So I'm the presenter for this section, but I'm also highlighting the work of former students, Glenn Ingram and Matea Wallace. So this is an interdisciplinary collaboration across campus. I'm in urban planning. I hire students in landscape architecture, and then we're working with it's trying to spread across campus a little bit, and we're looking to grow. We also provide links to our partner projects and universities that also link to our data sources and source material. We see this as a work in progress that we're hoping to continue to expand this section as well. So here's kind of, that's kind of the quick overview of the website, but I want to spend most of the presentation talking about our digital atlas that we call Regional Religious Systems in Hangzhou, China. And this is our use of Esri story maps on our website to present historical data. And so I'm going to go through and spend most of the time kind of focusing on this and showing the maps and the data. So I do think these are pretty popular and well-known, but ArcGIS story maps are a web app for maps, text, and images. What's kind of nice about these is they can be embedded in any website or provided as a standalone website. So you can put them in your existing websites, or you could send someone a URL and they'd be able to have access to this just as a standalone website. I see it's increasingly popular in a range of fields. I teach this in my ArcGIS classes in urban planning, and I see it all the time in a lot of different fields. It's user-friendly for anyone who's comfortable using ESRI or Esri ArcGIS, and you see this often featured in popular media and websites. So I do think it's kind of gaining more and more traction and is being commonly used. You must have the ArcGIS license to create these, but you don't need the proprietary software to view, which is both a strength and a weakness. You need the software to create it, but anyone, even if they're not paying the subscription fees, can view these story maps. And then what I'll be highlighting are the variety of mapping options and how we've used it in this context to display our data. So when you go to the website and our Atlas page, this is kind of what you first see is our regional religious systems in Hangzhou, China, where we're illustrating the confluence of Buddhist geography and culture in Hangzhou, China from 618 to 2022. So we've got almost 2,000 years of data that we're presenting in this digital atlas. And again, I'd just like to highlight again, I'm the presenter today, but this was a collaborative effort. I'm working with my students, Glenn Ingram and Matea Wallace, and also Jiang as well. So right at the beginning, we try to highlight what do we mean by regional religious systems. So we are recognizing that regionalism and localism in the physical, administrative, cultural, and socioeconomic growth is shaped by physical and spatial forces. So kind of the quick way to think about that is the landscape and geography of a region really shape how people organize themselves, how they trade, how they move, and how religion establishes and trades and grows as well. So our goal was really to connect the physical landscapes of this region to the historical and religious patterns of development in Hangzhou. So we make use of text boxes and callouts right at the beginning to help provide some of these definitions. The first map you see on this story map is a kind of an overview map where we're highlighting where is Hangzhou located, and kind of we show where the city's located, but we kind of do take a little bit more of a regional perspective as well. And then because we're really interested in how the physical landscapes influence patterns of religion and patterns of human settlement, our first map is illustrating kind of the topography of all of China. And so this map is a static map, which you'd be able to download at a high resolution. And this is was created in a combination of ArcGIS. And then we used a 3D modeling software called Blender to really highlight the topography of the mountains and to get a good sense of the whole country, as well as to situate where we're focused on for this digital atlas. One of the next interactive maps we use are called slider maps. And this is where the user on the website is able to click on this sliding tool, and what it does is it overlays a historic illustration over modern satellite imagery. And so what we're doing in this one is we've got these old illustrations of the imperial walls in Hangzhou, right, on West Lake, as represented by artists a couple hundred years ago, and then modern satellite imagery. So the user is able to click and drag and overlay this geo-referenced illustration over the top of where the historical walls would have been located and where the current West Lake boundaries are. And so it's not quite perfect. The artist did not have the satellite view at the time, but it does give a nice overview of kind of where this would be located and where the art then fits over the landscape. So we've got a couple of these hand illustrations of the imperial walls in the Southern Song Dynasty over current satellite imagery. We also use image panels because we do have these high resolution imagery of these illustrations of the old walls. And so we want to make those available to the user and that they can look at them. So we've uploaded high resolution images that users can click on, and then they can see some of these details of how the street networks were laid out, or the location of the hills and the wells, and kind of see actually how it changes over time from an artist's perspective. We then make use of interactive legend maps, where we design the map and the symbology, but the user is able to turn on and off different layers. And what we're showing in this first map are the digital representations of those imperial walls off of West Lake. And so we have them organized by periods of time and dynasty, where users can click on each one of these, and you see these polygons, they turn on and off, and they're the spatial extent of those old imperial walls. And then you can see how they change over time. The user has full control over zoom and scale, and this was one of our strategies that we were trying to map change over time. And so this is a difficult thing to do, is how do you, with a static map, show that things are changing over time? This is where we're really happy to have this digital option where the user could help illustrate that trend. We then, as they scroll down, we kind of made up this name, but this is what they look like. They're scrolling maps, whereas the user scrolls through the digital atlas, they can actually see those changes through time. And we've done 3D perspectives of how the imperial walls would change over time. As I'm illustrating here, as the user scrolls down, they just see on their screen the change of the extent and the shape of the wall. And then as it changes with time period and rulers. So you can kind of track over time. Here's how the walls have changed and shifted as through different time periods, and then also different rulers. We then make use of the sidecar maps, and that's an Esri term for this style, where text changes with locations on a map. So here you can see a call out where we're kind of describing this process of mapping. And we found this old scroll, which was kind of a perfect opportunity. So as the user scrolls down, we change locations on this scroll, and then we're able to provide additional text and imagery that's highlighting our approach and some of the historical information for this site. So this was great for following a path. We embraced that. We used illustrations of a path as the user moves through this. We then, you can embed videos into the ArcGIS story maps, where we can create a 3D maps. And what we chose to do was we had good data on pilgrimage routes throughout the region, where monks and other people would travel along kind of they'd go up river valleys and go to peaks and monasteries. We were able to then illustrate these pilgrimage routes in 3D by embedding a video. So we then can record a flyover and add labels. So I'm going to try to do a live demonstration here. So I'll just close this. Or here we are on our website, and here's the video that was then recorded. So you see the blue line, that is the approximate historical pilgrimage route. And then we're using modern 3D imagery and 3D topography to kind of show where they might have been traveling. And so it'll highlight different peaks in the region. But what I like about this is you can really see that for the most part, other than the parts of the journey up to the peak, they really are following river boundaries and the watershed lines. So this is exactly where people are settling today too. So it's really, I think, highlighting that the role of physical geography on patterns of behavior, trade, and religion. And so we found this to be a useful way to illustrate this concept. And so we created this in ArcScene, the 3D version of ArcGIS Pro, uploaded the video at a high resolution to YouTube, and then we're just able to embed that. So now we can get the full regional perspective of different pilgrimage routes. Then one of the last maps we have as part of our digital atlas is an interactive map of over 1,000 years of Buddhist temples in this Hangzhou, in the city and the region. And we used an interactive map where the user can turn on and off different layers, and they can also zoom in and out to see the extent of these locations of these historical temples and sites. So the user can zoom in and out of the region, and they can also click on every single one of these dots is representing a temple, and then they can get the information about that temple as well. And so this is we're featuring the extent of temples in Hangzhou from 5 different surveys. So the oldest ones are going back over 1,000 years, and then the most recent one is a 2006 survey. So you can turn on and off these layers to also see how the distribution and location of these temples have changed through time. Again, one of our goals to this whole digital atlas was to illustrate change through time. So that was kind of our digital atlas. I'll show you where you can access this and you can explore it. It's public, you can play around with this on your own, but I just wanted to highlight kind of our approach to mapping this data. And now I want to just kind of talk about some of the strengths, because this could be a tool that everyone can use. And I just want to kind of highlight some of what we found to be useful and where we saw some kind of shortcomings as well. So using story maps to illustrate this type of data was really helpful for combining text and maps online. Anyone can go to this website, they can read and learn about it and interact with the data. But we like the interactive maps where you can zoom in and out, you can turn on and off layers. It gives users it kind of gives them the data without them needing to have the software or any of the know-how. There's a variety of visually appealing presentation strategies. We really like the videos, the sliders, the different kind of traveling through time. We took our time. We spent a good amount of time on this digital atlas, but overall we felt it was fairly easy to use and develop. We were all comfortable with ArcGIS, so it would be challenging if you didn't know how to use this software. If you're comfortable with it, it's very easy to use. We liked how groups could collaborate on a single project. So I worked with 2 students over 2 semesters, and one graduated and moved on, and all her work was preserved, and we were able to pick it up because of the way that all the data is stored online, and we can create groups to collaborate. So all the data is stored remotely. That gives it also its good data management. We backed it up elsewhere, but it helps give us one more repository to protect this data. And then components of the story map can be used independently. We can embed that video, any of our interactive maps, we can send them. They can be separated out of this digital atlas or the story map and be a standalone image or map. And then we also can upload cartographic styles and templates. So anytime we get new students coming into the lab, we can give them the symbology and the base map and everything they need to start mapping so that it can fit within a general theme. They can have their own kind of good decisions on how to highlight data, but we can upload all of that cartographic styles into templates onto this website as well. So we like that functionality. There are some shortcomings. It is proprietary. The Esri ArcGIS license is not cheap. We're students and faculty, so we've got it. But if you did not have that license, it is expensive. So we want to highlight that this was proprietary. We found that there was some slow load screens. That's why one reason I'm not doing a live demonstration for all of you. There would be watching images load. I found that to be a shortcoming. And the larger the images they were, the slower it was. And so we really like having high resolution detailed maps. It did slow it down. And there were a few times we had to reduce our file size to upload onto the ArcGIS story map. So that video, we had it even higher resolutions, but there was no way it was going to, we hit the maximum file size there. To look at all these does require a lot of scrolling on a web browser, so the user has to be invested and interested to make it all the way through. We provide links so you can jump lower down into it, but these story maps tend to have a lot of scrolling. The display varies by user screen and computers. So if we all have different resolutions on our monitors and we have different kind of different size monitors, the display changes. So we didn't have full control over how the user saw this. And then not everything could be edited or adjusted. So you could take this approach with full control over creating your own website, the location of everything, all the kind of the iframes. You might get a little bit more flexibility with other approaches. So we found this a nice balance of easy to use, quick, but maybe we would have liked a little bit more control over a few items. So looking ahead, we want to continue to create maps for the RRS websites, really make sure that that data set is usable. We've sought additional funding to support and establish a formal university lab. We like working together, but we would also, it'd be helpful to have kind of formal designation. We've provided cartographic training for students and faculty. This research has helped support 2 or 3 students financially as they've made their way through their master's degree. We've done a poster presentation at a conference hosted at the U of A last year. Here's Glenn, our student's poster, and this won best poster that year at the conference. We're really happy with that. And then we're open to making additional story maps in other regions, and also we could expand this project substantially. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here and listening to this presentation. I do want to thank, again, highlight this is a team effort. I was the presenter, but I've been showing off maps made by Glenn and Matea, and then also the broader RRS research team. So thank you all very much. And then if there's any quick questions now, I'd be happy to answer them, or we're going to have time after the other 2 presenters as well.
Jeffery Leo, who's a PhD candidate, also at the University of Arizona.
Hey, please let me share my screen real quick. Are you all seeing my screen all right? Cool, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor, for your kind introduction. My name is Jeffrey. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the Department of East Asian Studies and now 5th and final year here at the University of Arizona. So my presentation for tonight will be Mapping Temple Amalgamation with Historical GIF, Spatial Interpretation of Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang's Institutional Reform. And I will quickly begin by talking about the outline of today's presentation. I will shortly introduce what exactly is his Temple Amalgamation Edict and how this edict can relate to different academic fields, including Ming political history, Ming Buddhism, and the study of Hangzhou as a region. Then I will talk about my study area, which is Hangzhou, and my major primary source, which is a Buddhist monastic gazetteer titled Wu Lin Fan Zhi. Then I will proceed to discussing my data and finish the presentation with a short conclusion. Okay, so according about this Temple Amalgamation Edict, it is a policy that is enacted nationwide, and basically it aims to merge smaller temples, the smaller, probably broken ones and not as functional ones, into larger temples that are probably functional. So merge some smaller temples into bigger ones. And for time, it happens approximately between the 6th and 30th year of the Hongwu era. And it was carried out over the nation, as I just said. And basically, Zhu Yuanzhang targeted his edict only towards Buddhist and Taoist temples. As for related fields, I believe this edict can resonate us with Ming Dynasty political history. So it can answer questions such as how to situate this edict in the imperial-centered governing scheme in the early to mid-Ming Dynasty. For reflecting on Ming Dynasty Buddhism and the society, we can ask ourselves, how did this edict influence the further development and the prosperity of Ming Dynasty Buddhism? So finally, it also concerns the regional study of Hangzhou. So what kind of regional characteristics in Hangzhou can we observe by studying this edict? So this is my primary source or sources. It is titled The Monastic Gazetteer of Hangzhou, Wu Lin Fan Zhi. And this is written in 1612. And this text is a complete record of all 465 Buddhist temples in Hangzhou. And apart from this, I also used some gazetteers, local sources, notes that are all compiled in the Hangzhou area. some of the examples are like so. And of course, I used a database from Purdue. It offers some correction of the contours of Hangzhou and helped me verify some of the places of the temples. As for the contents of the Wulin Fanzi, it has 12 fascicles, and the previous 6 fascicles talks about the documentation of Buddhist temples in Hangzhou, basically. And it is divided into 4 different geographical regions: the city walls, the southern mountain, Nanshan, or Beishan, northern mountains, and finally the 7 peripheral districts. And for the latter half of the Wulin Fanzi, it talks about patronages and rewards from the emperor and some government officials, and encounter dialogue with historical figures, mostly with eminent monks. And there are some honorable mentions in previous dynasties. So the latter half of the text supplements some information that regards Buddhist temples or Buddhism in Hangzhou. And this is the geography of Hangzhou in a nutshell. So this kidney-shaped polygon, I hope you can see my mouth right here, is the city wall contour of Hangzhou. See, this is the West Lake. And this entire area is the Hangzhou prefecture, Hangzhou, right? And this is how the Wulin Fanzi categorizes its geographical distributions of temples. So they are color-coded. I categorize them into different colors. So basically the red dots represents temples within the city wall. So you can see here it's pretty accurate. It mostly lies inside this contour, but of course there are some outliers. And the orange dots represent temples in the 7 peripheral districts in Changhua, Yuqian, Xincheng, a lot of the districts that are not in Hangzhou. And the blue dots are Nanshan temples. So in the southern mountains, you can see they are located in the south of the West Lake. And finally is Beishan, northern mountains. So temples that are on the north of the West Lake. And there are some temples that are located here, also on the north of Hangzhou, primarily in this Renhe County. So this presentation is about using GIS, and I believe with the application of it, I can discern regional trends of temple amalgamation that is not currently available. So why not available? Because for 2 reasons. First of all, current documents or historical materials that we have on temple amalgamation they only offers a broad overview. So they don't have specific details regarding the policies execution at regional or local levels. And one example is the lack of regional records. For example, the Gazetteer of Zushan is a text from Hangzhou. It says, well, this edict on temple amalgamation was not specifically given for any mountain or for any human beings. So this is just not recorded here. So the Gazetteer of Zushan does not feel that they should include this kind of details from a regional gazetteer's perspective. So let us see more about the historical sources. Again, from previous slide, there are no specific details on this edict. And according to the Jinling Fancha Zhi, or Gazetteer of Buddhist Monasteries in Nanjing, there is a agency called Central Buddhist Registry, Senlu Si, right? So they assign monks to distribute the edicts to quote unquote clean up the monks and temples. So this edict can be bifurcated into 2 discussions, A, monks, and B, temples. Let us start with temples. And according to 2 other primary sources, Qinluji or Shenming Fojiao Bangce, they talks about how temples would be like after the amalgamation or cleanup. So there's only 1 temple, Buddhist temple, and 1 Taoist institution are allowed per prefecture or pre-county, right? As for monks, again, similar in the records from the Jinling Fancha Zhi, if a temple only has 20 or fewer members, aka monks, they should be amalgamated into existing temples. So in this case, Yuanzhang thinks that if you are less than 20, this temple is too small, not functional, and should be scrapped and absorbed into some other greater temple. And if you don't comply, 不入丛林, right, do not wish to join a congregation, you'll be beheaded. So that is pretty harsh from my perspective anyways. And apart from primary historical sources, we have scholarly research. And again, it offers some tiny hints about its regional efficacy on how it's carried out in the region. Two examples. First of all, in Zhou Qi's studies, he uses a Japanese scholar's calculation by saying that after the temple amalgamation edict, the Jiangnan region, the prosperous part in southern China, has the highest numbers of teaching monasteries, 教寺, after this edict. And another example is from He Xiaorong and Li Mingyang's article. They uses the example from Suzhou. See? So after amalgamation, Suzhou, it only has 17 major monasteries that, the bigger temples that absorbs others, and over thousands of temples were amalgamated. What a sheer number of, temples being scrapped. And in this place, I offer a new insight towards temple amalgamation in my text, my primary text, the Wulin Fanzhi. And I took the liberty of naming the different kinds of temples. There are only two. So the first one, I call it a type 1 Buddhist temple. So a type 1 temple is the destination of temple amalgamation. They are the larger temples, wealthier temples, and more functional temples that people tend to go to. In contrast, we have type 2 Buddhist temples. They are the smaller, not functional, probably less wealthy, or even broken in some cases. They are amalgamated into another temple. So in a nutshell, type 1 Buddhist temple absorbs type 2 Buddhist temple. This is bigger, this is smaller. And let us look at two examples for either cases. A type 1 temple, for example, Taiping Guangfu Si, it is located in Haining, right? Haining, if you can see this ancient map, it has a little square that says Haining, and the Ning character is different because this is an ancient character. And this temple amalgamated two temples. First one is Yongming Si, and the other one is Guanyin Yuan. So this Guangfu Si is a type 1 temple. He, absorbed other temples. And according to local legends, Zhu Yuanzhang was born and tonsured here. So he became a monk and was born in this temple. After he became the emperor, he visited this place again to seek his mother's grave. So because of this story and affinity with Zhu Yuanzhang, there's an annual event based on this temple. It's called the Ga Taiping, and it happens on the 8th day of the second lunar month every year. And this originated in the Jiang period as an official festival, and it still happened this year. I looked online, I searched over the Chinese news after a 3-year COVID hiatus, of course. And for this year, I searched a newspaper and it said it has 100,000 people attending this. And I don't have pictures for it at the moment because they are not high resolution, but just imagine sort of like a night market. So kind of like a Taiwanese night market that I experience at home. You have food stalls on each side of the road, and there are artists, singers, dancers, and performers, and you can just attend this activity and just have fun. So that is what it is at the moment. In contrast, we have a type 2 temple. And according to an essay, record of building walls for the Yunju Shengshui temple, it says after amalgamation, all the walls are not there anymore. The temples are in ruin. It's very sad. And an example from the Wulin Fanzi is from the Huagai Xianshan Si. It is a quote from the text. It says, this temple was housed by bandits, and the statues were all stolen, and transferred somewhere else. After its amalgamation, this temple was abandoned shortly afterwards. So there are no monks because there are no statues to worship. And it's probably not even here anymore. At least I cannot find it on the map today. So let us turn to data discussion. There are 2 steps. First of all, I convert temple amalgamation data from my text, the Wulin Fanzi, and other sources into an Excel spreadsheet. Now I divide them into 4 geographical regions. Remember, the ones are from the city walls, northern mountains, southern mountains, and the 7 peripheral districts. And I highlight quote-unquote data anomalies. So basically, I investigate conspicuous spatial trends. We will come back to that later. So for data discussion, I have 4 points. First of all, we have a very low number of type 1 temple around Hangzhou city. And there is a strong imperial connection that we can observe for type 1 temples. so the larger type 1 temples. And for the smaller destroyed ruined type 2 temples, there is a large quantity of them in the text. And finally, there is a dichotomy between national and regional on this edict. So let's see what happens. So this is the distribution of type 1 temples in the prefecture of Hangzhou. So as you can see, not a lot of them are around the city walls, but there are actually several dots here because this is zoomed so far out, so it sort of disappeared. And actually, the reason is that many temples have the potential to be type 1 temples, meaning they fit Yuanzhang's criteria for amalgamation. They are bigger, wealthier, and they have more activities and more monks in that case. However, many of them were destroyed due to the wars between the Yuan and Ming dynasties and cannot be rebuilt before the edict was issued. Some examples being the very famous Lingyin Si and Jingchi Si. So one of them was rebuilt and the other was burnt. So those two temples are very suitable or very standard type 1 temples. They're big, the emperors like them, and they have a lot of donations from officials, important personnel, but they are neither type 1 nor type 2 temples. They're just, regular temples because they basically do not exist. They are burnt during or underwent rebuilt during the edict process. And the other thing is type 1 temples has very strong imperial connections from primary sources. They were either constructed by Wu Yue emperors or had profound connections with the imperial family, whether directly with the emperor himself or for the person that are closely associated with them. So again, it's noteworthy that some connections are not restricted to either the Ming Dynasty, the time period, or Zhu Yuanzhang as a person himself. Based on the data that I've read, many associations were linked to the emperors of previous dynasties or individuals that are closely tied to the imperial family. Two examples would be the Baoguo Temple, celebrating the birthday of a Yuan Dynasty emperor, and Zhaoqing Si, for example, served as a family temple for a Song Dynasty empress. Now, let's take a look at type 2 temples. This is the distribution, and if you can remember the distribution from type 1 temples, you can see that the quantity is a lot different. We have like 10 times more the dots in this than in the previous distribution. So there's a large quantity of type 2 Buddhist temples. Oh, probably not 10 times, but about 5 times, right? So with all the 465 Buddhist temples recorded in the Wulin Fanzhi, there are 47 type 1 bigger temples that remains and 264 type 2 smaller temples. And this indicates that there are so many smaller, less than 20 residence temples, unused, and less functional Buddhist temples in Hangzhou. And hypothetically, those are the Buddhist temples less favored by Zhu Yuanzhang. And thirdly, I would like to turn to the national trend of this edict. So a scholar, Zhang Dewei, he has the data that demonstrates a particular trend in this edict that is associated with geographical distance. So in his calculation, Suzhou has 308 amalgamation records, Songjiang has 154, Daming, a small city in northern China, has 5, and Hangzhou, my data, has 264. So what is this about? He said, the longer the distance it was from Nanjing, which is the capital at the time, the less effective the amalgamation policy was. So this is Nanjing, and this is Suzhou. So Suzhou, this is very close. The closest, actually, it has 308 edicts, temples being amalgamated. And Hangzhou, being the second closest, has the second largest number, followed by Songjiang, which is right here. And Daming is all the way right here. See, this is just, I don't know how far that is, but this is definitely farther than those three. It only has 5. So he concludes, the longer the distance, the less effective it is. However, in my calculation, at least from Hangzhou, regional trends of the edict is very different. From a national perspective, amalgamation is more effective closer to the administrative center, aka Nanjing, his data. And in my data, from a regional perspective, amalgamation are less effective in proximity to the administrative center, which is the city wall of Hangzhou, the Hangzhou city. So if you can remember the two distributions of type 1 temple and type 2 temple, right? There are only a few of them near the city. Most of the temples with amalgamation records are elsewhere. They can be in the 7 peripheral districts. They can be in Renhe, Haining, what have you, just not in proximity to the city walls. Pretty interesting. And I have 2 scholars who back me up with this kind of claim. First of all, Zhou Qi, he says, this is a signifier for one of the hindrances to the national policy. In this case, the national policy means the efficacy of temple amalgamation, is the culture generated by local power structures. To pile it up, Timothy Brook argues, this power of elites, the gentry society, local power to deflect state hegemony is prominent in the mid-Ming. So they would fight off imperial power to establish their own public authority as a region or to establish their local identity. Finally, to shortly conclude this presentation, this edict affirms Zhu Yuanzhang's suppressing stance on Buddhism. At the same time, it effectively controls the overall quality of Buddhist institutions. I mean, got to give him that, right? He reduced many type 2 temples that are unused, broken, and not functional. And in this regard, it sort of fostered growth in the development of Ming Buddhism. And finally, it observes a strong and vibrant community from the gentry society, the elite local powers, that effectively suppressed the imperial authority, aka this edict, in order to formulate a culture of the elite in Hangzhou. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll move on to our third speaker, Dr. Jiang Wu, also the University of Arizona. I'm sure most of you know was awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship this year. We're very honored to have him here this evening, or afternoon, or day, wherever you may be. So please, Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, so I'm sharing my slides right now. Okay, yeah. So in the beginning, I want to thank Center on Religion and Global East at Purdue University for inviting me and my team to make this presentation. It's really a great opportunity for us to introduce our project. My colleague Philip Stoker and also Jeffery Liu already introduced some of the aspects of our project, and I will focus on a unsolved issue. So I hope today I'm going to make it clear. The title of my presentation is Measuring the Prestige Index in a Regional Religious System. This is based on a paper I'm working on. So I have a written paper, but today I'm going to talk through my slides. So I have a couple of agenda here. So if I have time in the beginning, I will introduce a little bit about our RRS background. That stands for Regional Religious System, by the way. And then I will move to the topic of today, which is the prestige index. So why we need that, right? What it is about, and how to measure the prestige index, right? So the crucial issue we find is that it's very hard to calculate, to give a number. So what we're doing is that we try to find a proxy. Right, so we have different experiments and examples. I hope I can show you during this presentation. And then that follows a short conclusion. Right? So first, our project is conducted under this framework we call Regional Religious System, which represents a spatial formation of a group of religious sites, which have intricate connections with regionally distributed factors such as population, economy, transportation. Right? So we have been working on this for a very long time, and we have a project in the beginning we call BGIS, which is basically a collection of various data related to temple sites. So we have a short introduction on our website at the center. We have a Center for Buddhist Studies, by the way, cbs.arizona.edu. So you can go and find our projects. One of them is BGAS. And also it evolves into what we call right now RRS. And there's a Wikipedia entry, by the way, to kind of introduce this concept. And we put forth this concept, I think, 10, maybe 15 years ago. I remember that's 2012 at AAS. So I made a presentation over there. So right now we have a Hangzhou Buddhist Cultural Project. Philip Stoker already introduced you to our website at rs.arizona.edu, which is a repository of our maps. And in addition to that, we already published a book. And so that's called, it's edited book, right? So many of the scholars in this field contributed to this volume, including Jonathan Pettit here, and also Fenggang Yang, who is the director of the Center on Religion and the Global East. So we're very grateful for their participation, and I believe it's still on sale. If you have this promotion code, you can get a discount copy, 30% off. And also for today's presentation, I made the same presentation at last year's Pacific Neighborhood Consortium here at the University of Arizona. We co-hosted this conference annual meeting with Academia Sinica in Taiwan. So that's exactly the presentation. But today I updated that presentation. And but however, while we're doing this, we just apply some existing methods such as hierarchical regional space, exploratory spatial data analysis, spatial regression, point pattern analysis, overlay analysis, kernel density analysis. If you know GIS, these are the conventional kind of techniques. But however, we feel it's not enough. Right. So today I'm going to explore the prestige and analysis, see if we can develop something new. Right. So the problem and the challenge is that right now all our methods have treated religious sites as merely ordinary locations, right? Because the current data sets are all called from locational information with various levels of accuracy. Therefore, it's a great need to develop new methods and assess religious sites and their related significance sophisticately. So we want to analyze this more sophisticately. So the problem is like this. So when you see the maps, manual maps we created, you can see a problem immediately. That is, we tend to flatten the actual situation, right? So all the sites, religious sites, institutions reflected on the map, they appear as a dot, many dots, same size, right? Equal size. And on this map, we cannot distinguish which one is more important, right? So no matter it's a bigger or small. So, and also this is a great abstraction of the GIS data. So we want to change this and meet this challenge. So then our idea is that we look at prestige. So then the question is why prestige matters, why it is important, right? So we need to understand, so why a temple, a religious site, is important in the local area. And in Chinese religion, a religious site can be large or small. There are more land ownership for this temple or site. And also there may be more or less residential clergy on the temple ground, right? So I think we somehow need to reflect that in our mapping practice, right? And these temples, they play various roles in the local area as connectors to local social and economic life. So we thought it is pretty important, right? And also we have some assumptions about Chinese religious sites. The first, we thought lineage, for example, and the sectarian affiliations probably are important, but actually on the ground, they may not be that important, right? And also we think about the clergy, ritual specialists. So these are maybe the owners of the temple, but actually lots of the temple, they hire clergy, ritual specialists to serve a particular purpose, right? So on the actual ground, it's a very, very different situation. But however, prestige seems to be something quite stable and important for Chinese religious sites. And so a prestige site in Chinese religion is more likely to receive more patronage, right? Both cultural, economic, and is more likely to survive in China's long and turbulent history. Right? So I cite here C.K. Yang, who is a eminent scholar in the field of sociology of Chinese religion, for example. In his book, he argues actually temple's prestige is more important, much, much more important, right, than its sectarian affiliation. And the prestigious temples tend to become the destination of the pilgrimage and tourism, right? So that seems to be a good observation. So I agree with him completely. However, there never exists a quantifiable index to measure how prestigious a religious site is. So our question is to quantify that, see if we can be successful, right? So during our process of research, we have received lots of feedbacks from our colleagues. So I mentioned last year's PNC meeting. So during the meeting, some scholars give us advice. For example, one scholar suggests a book here exists on market by Douglas Humberg, right, How to Measure Everything. Right. So this book is really talking about even some intangible kind of a non-physical aspect, we can measure those. And also during the PNC, we heard a keynote speech by eminent scholar Paul Wang, right, who is a scientist actually. His research subject is cloud, the actual cloud. It's not the digital, Google Cloud or Box Cloud, but the actual cloud. Right? Think about cloud is such a difficult object in the sky, but however, scientists were able to study that, measure that, right? So that gives us lots of inspiration. And then the takeaway from these conversations and the books is that we have a measurement problem, right? But however, nearly everything can be measured, right? The key is to find the right approach. Second is the probability, right? So I'm not talking about any number or index can be accurate, but however, they're only a kind of a probability, right? So probability theory and the tools are very important in the process. Number three is the measurement process, right? Defining what we want to measure of intangible factors. So there are different factors. So selecting appropriate measurement methods and then applying quantitative techniques, right? And also last one is decision making. So in the data science practice, actually, during our research, we made lots of decisions. Those decisions actually affect how we're going to measure as well, right? So keep this in mind. The decision you make, how to arrange your data, what to be included, that will affect the result, right? So let's go back to this question of prestige. Actually, this kind of an ordinary, normal question. So prestige occurred in our daily life. People talk about prestige based on, for example, achievements, wealth, influence, power, authority, reputation, respect, and also the rank, right? So there are different ranking systems, right? And also your success. All these actually are perceptions, right? But however, in the modern society, scientists are able to measure that, right? For example, we often talk about consumer price index, right? So that's basically a combination of a group of factors, right, with different weight, right, with different weight, right? And also most often is that the ranking, college ranking system. We work in the higher education. So recently, that's the college application season. A lot of kids, including my daughter, applying schools. So ranking becomes very important. So that somehow is a reflection of prestige as well, right? So some of the methods can be really interesting for us to learn. And also we learned in the process is that the social network analysis, right? Social network can be used as an indicator of prestige as well, right? So these methods are really helpful for us during our process of research. So if we want to quantify that, ideally, I really call this PI, prestige index, we're gonna have this formula, right? So basically the summation of a group of factors each of them going to time with weight, right? It's a percentage, could be, right, 10%, 15%, and then divided by the summation of the weights in total, right? So in that case, mostly it's 100%, right? So ideally that should be like this, right? But however, in the religious field, in our data practice, we find that's really difficult, right? To be, to find all the factors, give it a weight, right? So we go back to our data, right, to think about what we're looking for. And first of all, we need to define what is prestige of a religious site, right, in a particular domain, right? So here I put a term called domain, right? So it's very obscure here, but so far we haven't find any kind of a replacement so far, right? So according to my understanding, the prestige of a religious site is a accumulated intangible perception of a place associated with a religious symbol in a domain, right? Could be in the region, could be subjective, but however, that's a dimension, right? So we talk about prestige. Second, such perceptions are subjective constructs based on collective consciousness and memory about the place and its association with historical or imaginary figures, events, or religious symbolism, circulated within a communication circuit shaped by both oral and written means, right? So it gets a little bit complicated, right? So in this definition, I introduce multiple kind of terms, concepts, right? So I don't have time to explain everything for today, right? But one thing I want to emphasize again is this notion of a domain, right? So it's not a physical, it's intangible. It occurred in our consciousness and the memory, and also it circulates within a circuit, right? So we call that communication circuit, right? So oral communication, written communication, including printing, dissemination of written words are very, very important, right? So then the prestige index measures the scale of such perceptions of a religious site, and it can be considered, sorry for the typo, right, as one of the indicator of the site's potential of survival and revival, right? So I think it's very important, right? So conceptually, to measure the prestige index, we can consider a number of factors. So I list them here, right? So for example, right, the royal government patronage, right? So that's the indicator that the temple has become prestigious, right? And also location advantage. So the site of the temple may be close to the city wall, to the gate, transportation hub, and also close to government agency, for example, right? So this can be the indicator of the prestige as well. Land ownership, taxation, right? They pay more taxes, so presumably they own more land, right? So the coverage in historical sources, right? So there are more historical sources devoted to this site. There are temple gazetteers, there are local gazetteers, prefecture gazetteers, they all mention this temple. That could be indicator as well. Of course, the size of the buildings, right? And the number of proxy indicators such as wooden board and the planks. Later, I'm going to talk about that if we have time with calligraphy. So we thought that proxy can be useful. And the number of residential monks or professionals, right? Whatever you want to call them. So that can be indicator as well. And also number of visitors and pilgrims, right? So this can be the indicator considered into this index. And also fame of the founding patriarchs and the prestige of their lineage, right? So I said the lineage may not be that important, but it's still important, right? Still important. Of course, the years of its existence, right? So these factors, I think we all need to consider, right? And how to measure that? Once again, going back to the notion of a domain. So I think we need to keep in mind that they function in different kind of time and spatial kind of a framework, right? So the first question we need to answer is that if this is prestige or not, and how prestige, right? And for how long? So the duration of the prestige. When we think about the prestige index, is only relevant to particular time period, right? Could it be just a reign of a ruler, right? During Yuanzhang, for example, the founder of the Ming, so that becomes prestige because of the connection with the emperor. But after emperor passed away, so there may be the change for the temple, for the prestige. Or it can last for one dynasty, can last for more than one dynasty, right? So we need to be aware of the time frame. And also there are different levels in terms of space, right? So first it's about local. So that a temple or site can be prestige at the local level, right? So the geographical range of the reference source clearly indicates the criteria only valid in the local regions such as city, town, or village lines. B, the regional level. So the geographical range of the reference sources, the sources, right? So they are often connected to space and the time, clearly indicates the criteria only valid in the region such as prefecture, province, physiographic area, right? Like macro-region, basin, watershed, mountain range, or a cultural zone such as dialect zone, right? So these can be the indication that a temple, a site, is prestige only in a certain region, right? Then is the national. The range of reference sources clearly indicates the criteria only valid at the national level, such as the state-designated ceremonial sites, the seat of clergy registration management agency, the process of symbolic capital, such as the state-sponsored Buddhist canon. Right, so this can be the indication of the national prestige, right? However, the last thing I want to mention is that there are certain temples in China, they enjoy some kind of a international prestige in East Asia, in particular Buddhist temples. They have been known in Japan, Vietnam, in Korea as well, right? So in that case, the geographical range of the reference sources clearly indicates the criteria only valid at the international level if it was documented in foreign sources in a prominent way, particularly in Japan, Korea, and the West, right, including Europe. Right? Due to the restriction of the contact methods and the location of the international exchange, the reference to a temple in international sources do not necessarily translate into similar prestige in China. Right. So, it can be for some very weird reason, right? So this temple got kind of enlarged, the image got enlarged in the foreign country. So here I have the case of Haichuan Temple. So during the Opium War, right, before the Opium War, this is the only temple open to the foreign residents in Guangzhou. Right? So it got a disproportionately kind of featured in Western literature during that time. Looks like, well, Haichuan Temple was the most famous temple in China, right? So we need to keep in mind, right? Then next, so then what's our approach? I listed so many different factors, but however, it's not practical to consider that quantifiable, right? So put them in the formula and calculate. So the direct way or easier way for us is to find the right proxy. So what I mean is that we want to identify the one single indicator, right? No matter what it is, the number of residents, the size of the temple, which can be directly correlated with the prestige index. So we can use that as a proxy index or number, right, to indicate that. So this is because the data we have has serious problem. It's not a systematic, right? It's uncontinuous. It's not a year by year. So we will be lucky if we have a data like every 10 years. But however, even for contemporary data, we all know the situation in China where we're not be able to have the data like that, like economic data consistently, systematically. And also they are often fragmented. So in some sources we have information like this, in other sources we have information like that. So it's a serious problem with our data. So it's very difficult to quantify, right? But however, the possible solution, as I said, is to find a proxy. Right? So I'm going to show you examples here. So I will go quickly. For example, we have a 1930 Republican time data. So we have about 400 Buddhist temples. So we did the research on that to look at the size, look at the residents, number of residents. And for example, we look at a Buddhist temple, look at the resident monks, the number of monks, right? The top three are Yunqi Temple, Tianzhi Temple, and Zhenji Temple. The most populous temple is Yunqi Temple, the 50 residents. So this is 1930, right? So for people study Buddhism in Ming and Qing dynasty, Yunqi, you can't miss Yunqi Temple. So that was revived, founded by Yunqi Zhuhong, so which is basically the most famous monk in the late Ming, right? In Hangzhou. And all three, we did a little bit of research about the history. They all related to Zhuhong, right? So somehow Zhuhong revived them. The other temple like Tianzhi, Zhenji. So it becomes very interesting. This temple becomes famous in the local region, right? In the local region. And also it has Taoist temples. So we found this very interesting. It has 101 Taoist temples. So we have the data like location, person in charge, the land ownership, the property value, right? So these are kind of valuable for us as well. So we have a Christian church as well. So, but however, we're not expert in this regard. So we're not being able to kind of assess those, right? And the next example is the 1952 data, right? This is a comprehensive survey after Communist Army kind of took over Hangzhou. So we have information about 400 temples as well. You can see the number didn't change that much. And about many own property, about 30 of them own sizable properties. And but however, very few resident monks, right? So lots of them have less than 5 monks, right? So we make maps. So you can see this map is different from the previous map. I call the flattening map, because here you can see the bigger dot, right? Because right now we use the number of rooms as a criteria. So then there are different kind of indicators showing there are some temples, they are really big, right? In terms of the number of rooms, the size, right? And also there, the Jingsi temple seems to be number 1, right? And also we have a Taoist data showing the Fuxingguan seems to be the most prestigious. If we look at the number of residents, there's 30 residents in Fuxingguan. So, and also there are other numbers. I want to go quickly because my time is running out, right? So one experiment we did is that we use the length of historical records as the indicator, right? So in local gazetteer, the assumption is that the longer the records are, the more prestige the temple become, right? So this is one page from Hangzhou Fuzhi. You can see there are multiple lines. What we did is just simply count lines, right? Columns. I see this record, how many columns it occupied. Use that as an indicator. We also have a 1784. Oh, this is the same record. So this is basically summary about our research. So these 10 have more than 20 columns or lines showing they're important, right? But interestingly, there are quite a few Taoist temples, right? Showing the importance of Taoist temples in Hangzhou area. So another experiment we did is to count the wooden boards temple has. Their historical record.
Maybe
Yeah.
one more minute, 2 more minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
one more minute, I will
Thank you.
wrap up, right? So we did that just during the summer, and we went to Japan. So this is temple built by Chinese monk. So we have a quite good resource for that. So I don't have time to go through this. I will jump to my conclusion. But before that, I want to show this research done by Marcus Bickenhammer showing the social network connectivity. So I mentioned that can be an indicator for the importance and the prestige of temple, right? This last slide, I want to emphasize that it's very useful, but however, there's no single solution. So we can use the prestige index to document the temple with prestige and to study their composition and the various factors, and also visualize this on the map to compare the change of the temple prestige and to study the distribution of prestige temples at different levels, right? Of course, to provide advice for cultural conservation and the preservation, right? So that's all for my presentation. I want to thank Jonathan